Okay. We're going to get this thing started. Andy Rosenberg was revolutionary in creating the look of modern day basketball. He's here. He's a 17-time Emmy winner, pioneered a bunch of cameras that we're going to talk about today, and really helped define modern sports broadcasting coverage and storytelling. Next, we have Eddie Okuno. He is currently director specialist at ESPN. You can see him as a camera operator for Andy back in the early 90s. See him in the corner there covering Michael, and then a bunch of other camera operators that were on Andy's crew. And then Steve Hellmuth. I like to describe Steve as if David Stern is kind of the George Washington of the NBA. Steve Hellmuth is kind of the Hamilton who behind the scenes is doing all the really cool stuff that really needed to get done to advance the cause. So you'll see the Sports VU bubble. The Sports VU player tracking, as well as the bubble. Both Eddie and Steve were instrumental in that. We'll talk about that here in a little second. So we couldn't have a better panel. And to me, it's amazing that these three started in 1990 when NBA took over NBC. Steve was at the NBA, Andy was directing, and Eddie was one of his camera operators. So good things come in threes, and just excited to go here today. Let's start with that slash camera, Andy. That's a camera angle that we use all the time in NBA. How'd you come up with the idea, and then how'd you get it across the goal line?
Well, the idea came up because I wanted to make stars out of the players. That was the mandate we had when we took over the NBA, was to make stars out of the players. People already were rooting for the shirts, for the teams, for the cities, but let's make them stars. And traditionally, close-ups of players were taken from a high-profile shot or a handheld, but guys run through the handheld shots and kind of block it. So I want a nice, clear shot where I could see full face the players and see their reactions, see their emotions, because that's what draws people in.
So you had this idea. Now, how does it get implemented? You go to the NBA and the broadcasting department where Steve's at.
We had a great relationship started from day one with the NBA. It was encouraged by David Stern and Dick Ebersol. And we would meet every week to discuss how we're going to promote the game, what happened the last week, what's going to go on the next week, and how we're going to promote the future. And so early before we began the season, I came up with this idea, and in a meeting with the group, I said, what I'd like to do is I want to put cameras in the corners. I'm going to have to kill a few seats to do this. David Stern looks at me and says, those are pretty expensive seats. Yeah, I know.
And so, Steve, you tell your side of the story because you're the one that took this to the ownership.
Yeah, so the arenas originally were not designed to accommodate slash cameras. Since the dictate of slash cameras, the arenas and the vomitories have been placed to minimize the kill of seats, right? So we actually changed the architecture of NBA buildings with the positioning of this camera. But David put me up on stage in a private meeting with the team presidents to explain that they're going to lose a large swath of seats on both sides of the arena. And if it wasn't for David standing right behind me, they would have charged the stage and roughed me up because they were very upset. But David was behind me smiling, and they took the news and we got it implemented. So yeah. It wasn't easy. It's still the most difficult camera architecturally to place in a new arena to get it right.
Yeah, David was visionary. He saw how this was going to help, and he said, okay, I'll let you try it at one end of the court at the beginning of the season. Began in Chicago, and it took out some really good seats. And by the end of the season, he said, okay, I'll let you do both ends of the court for the playoffs and the finals. And it was the end of that season that he sent Steve to say, okay, this is now mandated across all venues for the NBA.
I'm guessing that Chicago was not one of them. I'm from Chicago, by the way. I'm guessing Chicago was not one of the more friendly buildings to that transition.
There were cameramen had to be, well, yeah, Eddie can tell you how they had to sweet talk the people around them.
Correct. But initially, the Bulls played at the old Chicago Stadium. And that was difficult when we first established that. But then we transitioned to the United Center, which had that design, Steve, with the VOMs being larger. Except for what we call the near side right vom, which there was none there because then we had to find a mid slash there. But the first near side left was pretty much the UC was the footprint for a lot of the other stadiums and arenas that came into play, like Staples Center and other venues that started coming in line.
And that was really what the slash is all about, is to be able to get intimate with the players and for their reactions.
So does Michael and Nike send you like a check every year for helping make him a star?
I would just like a tiny percent.
Yeah.
No.
There you go.
There's Shaq.
That's just the emotion that I just got. That's what made the NBA. It was all the players. They understood that they were the stars. And when you started in the NBA, how many cameras? CBS had the contract before NBC took it over. How many cameras roughly did you think they had for a regular season game? And then how many cameras did you have on a regular season game?
I think they probably had 5 or 6 in a regular season game, and we had probably about a dozen, 14 on a regular season game.
And so other than the slash camera position, you added a center court handheld.
Center court handheld with a super slow-mo on it.
Okay.
Which is unique.
Eddie, you want to talk through how you did that and
that man did it,
the cadence and how you used it and even worked with the slash camera?
Yeah, the super slow-mo, the high frame rate camera was just coming into play during that time from the technology standpoint, and the center position was one of the closest that you can get next to a player as they ran by you to basically slow down the speed of play that goes left to right. At that time, when we first instituted it, we were fortunate enough to be on the court. My predecessor, Dave Hagan, he was operating that in the East team. I was in the West team. And then when Dave went on and started directing in New York, Andy brought me in and says, let's put you in here and let's see what we can make of this. And so when I was lucky because I'm only 5'8", Dave was 6'5", and he was tall, and all the refs kept on tripping over him, and I had to make friends with all the refs like Danny Crawford and Bennett Salvatore, and just say, I'm right here. I'm not going to trip over. Don't trip over me. And we made good eye contact and friendship and stuff like that. And also the other most important is not to get blocked by the referee as the shot happens, like the Michael Jordan last shot on Game 6 of the NBA Finals. So all these things, nuances, it took time to build the relationship, to get the correct angle, the correct nuances. From a coverage standpoint with Andy and our crew, our camera crew, we were together for 10 to 11 years straight. And we were all committed. We kept on refining the coverage. And one of the things that when the so-called speed shot left to right from a center court handheld was not just to get it tight all the time, because at that point, technology, the lensing, even the slash cameras, luckily the basketball stadium is much smaller. The 55 was as far as is the biggest lens we had. And for myself, the 20 by, I think it was 18 at that time, was the best lens we had. So we wanted to, by the time we get to 98, we wanted to build a cadence and get Michael Jordan's swagger. And then we had the 2 slash cameras to get the reaction in the tight shot. So every time it was on the near side, when he shot like the last shot of Michael Jordan, he shot it, he would always come by, kind of build a little arch. And it was important for me when he took me to be head to toe, because you kind of want to see that strut, that Michael Jordan strut that he did. And then when he made that bend, Andy would cut to either left or right slash. In other words, the hero, the GOAT, and then back to game. So there was a cadence that we built back at that time, all driven by this man right here.
And you guys had one of the first super slow-mo cameras
Yes.
from Sony.
Yes.
And there were basically like just one of them or 2 of them in the country or in the world. And you chose to put it, Andy, on the handheld. Why'd you go there?
Because the look was going to be more intimate. You could actually see the size, the speed of the players, and even though you're slowing it down, you could see their body movement in a way that you can't see from elsewhere, and you can see both ends of the court. So you're going to get the most bang for your buck by having it able to shoot both ends of the court and reaction shots, because every player comes back to the middle for his reaction.
One of the fantastic things about that as well is that the players know our announcers, and they will usually react to them as well. It's just the Michael Jordan shrug, right? that move and everything else. So there was always some type of a reaction that was always centered, focused toward the announcers, and we're able to slow that down even better through the super slow mo.
Interesting to note that Michael Jordan played in the SD era.
Yes, yeah.
So you didn't get a chance to see him with HD play defense because he always played defense like a panther. He was always on it. Frequently, he was out of frame, right? But with our film cameras in The Last Dance, you got a chance to see him play some defense. But it was remarkable.
Yeah, we would.
Can you guys address the transition from standard def to high def and what that meant starting from the league standpoint, from the truck standpoint?
Well, there's no doubt that HD, because the aspect ratio greatly improved the experience of viewing, the NBA. In fact, that's where we first came up with the idea. Well, actually, it was Phil Garvin of Mobile TV Group came up with the idea of dual feeds, right, of sharing trucks, because it was our imperative to get more HD on the air, because it was a better experience to watch the NBA in HD. You got to see the entire court, and you got to see the men play defense and the strategies.
Yeah, it actually designed almost for a basketball court, just because of the nature of the width of it, really worked out quite well. And initially we had to shoot as if it was an SD and had to be concerned for that because most people at home didn't have HD TVs yet.
Right.
As we began.
So going back to standard definition, there's a camera on the screen and you explain what you have in your hand and what
it's a Groucho Marx cigar.
This camera started the concept of the current day, modern day above the rim. There, right there, that picture, that is everybody who knows Dan Grange. That's Dan Grange. This is where it all started, on finding locations of where to put above the rims, behind the glass, below the rims, underneath the photo stanchions. It all started with this, with countless, hey, there's Mr. Winnick too, countless hours of where are we going to put this camera to change look and get a different angle. So this camera, and I was talking to Ed from Fletcher too, and the story of how this came about and how he found it. This was an industrial camera that was nowhere near broadcast market. So, but this gave us the size and the scale and the image quality that we needed. But most importantly, get us to locations that we just couldn't get with traditional cameras.
It was a look that I wanted to have.
Yes,
I wanted to see the players coming at the basket. I wanted to be able to see the rebounding, as opposed to seeing it from behind. I wanted to see their faces as they're going up and reaching and going for the ball, because that's where the action really happens. And it was a vision that I had, and then I called you and you said, I think we can take care of you.
Yes.
But then we had to get it through the NBA. And I love the story that Steve has. You have to get it approved by the NBA to put this behind the backboard that's moving.
Yeah. So at some point there were multiple cameras in the backboard, robotic above. The still guys had put cameras in the backboard. Literally the entire backboard was filled with cameras and technology. So at the time, Rod Thorne was the senior vice president of basketball operations. I brought Rod out in the court and I said, Rod, take a look at this. What do you think? I mean, you okay with this? He said, Steve, these fellas don't see anything but the goddamn rim. I don't care what you do in the backboard. Go ahead. That was it.
And with the NBA,
no way.
Sorry, Steve. Yeah, no, it was with the NBA, the relationship that we built, where they were supporting us, we were supporting them. It was really a symbiotic relationship that we tried to make the best that we could to really promote the game and promote the players.
Well, transitioning to a little bit about data and all the things that you did, Steve, with the capturing data of the players. Can you just talk about that, the Sport VU?
Yeah. Well, let me just add, we talked about this behind the scenes. the robotic camera, and I designed the shot clocks themselves so that they could hold the robotic camera. Transparent shot clocks are actually, the patent is owned by the NBA, not by me, of course. But that camera is used 70% of the time to decide replay center reviews, right? And so having that lens so close to the field of play really matters.
And those cameras are on every NBA broadcast.
Now the NBA subsidized them so that they're on every telecast.
Can you go through the bubble? You guys are heroes for having basketball and giving something for all of us to watch, during COVID. How did you pull that off?
Well, the idea was, first of all, the NBA had a network in place. So we have a network we called HSAN, the High Speed Arena Network. So we had 10 channels of delivery to every venue, right? So if the RSN didn't own a studio, they would just pull a mobile TV truck into the venue and produce from there. So we had the transmission paths. In addition to that, we set up a 256 by 256 Evertz router to handle all of the feeds across all of the venues. And we had about, I would say, no less than 40 robotic cameras provided by Fletcher, provided by NEP, that covered the entire compound because, of course, it was COVID. You couldn't follow somebody down the hallway. You couldn't get access otherwise. So we created a completely interconnected environment. On top of that, of course, the courts were plain. There was nothing on the courts. So we did virtual signage for every single game, in addition to designating one of the teams a home team. So when we designated a team a home team, we would let their game entertainment director control the music and control the entire experience. And then we'd also pipe crowd sounds back into the venue that were then picked up by the broadcast mics. Now, we knew that what we got from the players was, could you turn that crowd sound up? Makes us feel normal. Get it louder. And then the next request was from the away teams, the teams that were designated away. They said, hey, Steve, I'm not hearing boos when I walk off the court. I want to hear boos, right? So that's something we didn't do. We didn't do the booing. Then we also came up with the idea of the virtual crowd. We did that with Microsoft Teams, but it was enabled because of SRT. So what we do is we blast a signal directly from the venue to the people that were that were watching on Teams in the virtual crowd. So they were only like a second and a half delayed. So the directors could, if a team had a great finish, hit a 3-point shot, went into the half ahead, they could go beat, and take the crowd. And the crowd was actually reacting to what was going on. And they couldn't react immediately, of course, because there was some delay. But we really created an entire environment for the players, to normalize, to try to normalize their experience and to try to bring the fans something special, and to give all of the RSNs, their experience, their control, and make it their games.
I remember when I first got the call about the concept of the bubble, and I can't say my reaction here public of what might say other than say what, and how are we going to restart sports in the COVID era. But it all came to fruition because the partnership that at that time which is ESPN, Turner Sports, with the NBA, and obviously the priorities of making sure that the RSN's distribution was in place. All those key elements, along with also local news, all the Sports Center shows, all the other shows, NBA Today, all the other things that hangs off the NBA. How are we going to service everybody? And building out the concept of an Olympic style IBC distribution, because there was 3 venues on one property at ESPN's Wide World of Sports. And at that time, we had to build to Steve's and the NBA's dream of basically building 3 NBA arenas with high HSAN, all the clock data, all the intelligent DTVI, everything at that time that was necessary, and we had how much time? We didn't have a lot of time to get everything going.
A lot of time.
Yeah, and we're living in COVID era with all the restrictions. So we built within the compound. We built a field shop. We built a process of making sure everything's are sanitized. There was a tiered level of only certain people can go into certain the court and also the compound. But the engineering part of it, with the partnership with Dave Barry and the engineering team with MBA, and just trying to build that IBC and that distribution point was the key. And with Chris Brown and the Turner Sports, we all agreed on, with all the different trucks that were there in the courts and all the number of games, and the opportunity to have a clean slate at the primary HP Arena venue that we always wanted a rail cam. It's difficult to do a rail cam other than an all-star game. And so can we now do it here for all the venues, as well as new camera angles like left foul line extended with the larger lens? So again, we had a clean slate, and the NBA supported all this. And it really was, it brought a tear back to me. I watched that because it was such an incredible feat. And the thing that I'm most proud of is that nobody fell ill during that period of time, because everybody took the time to be careful and be very thorough.
What did you take away from that? What do we see in today's broadcast that you learned from being in the bubble?
I would probably say the improved audio, a real focus on trying to collect the voices of the players.
Perfect
all over
transition.
the court. So I would say that was, and then we also learned that there is a better slash shot.
Yes.
Drop the camera down and push it close to the field of play, right? We did learn that if we didn't have crowds, a rail cam would be a wonderful thing.
Right.
I mean, there are, but it also really convinced us even further of the fact that we needed to get our lighting, get the CRI on all of our LED lighting, and improve our LED lighting across the board in the NBA.
It was great to see you get the slash camera back to where it started in Chicago.
Yes.
At 15 feet above the ground.
Right.
And in close, right down the line.
Yeah. And the biggest thing for me that takeaway was access. It gave us access to the players. It gave us access to the court. It gave us all the walk back through to the hallways, the locker room, the tunnels. We had all those cameras and angles covered, and that access, including the audio access, player microphones. We were pushing the envelope with more player microphones.
Talk about how you made a microphone that you convinced the players to wear. How did you go about that?
Yeah. So I don't know if Paul Johnson's here, but Quantum X, right? So we're having a hard time with placing microphones on NBA players. So we found Quantum X, and they agreed to do something that I thought was essential, which is to have the battery on one side of the microphone and the transmitter on the other, so that it was flexible, right? And they were the only company that would build that for me, so I could show the players that if you fall on this, it bends, right? And mostly that was cosmetic, right? But it was showing how interested we were in their health and well-being. And then Paul Hersheimer, originally worked for Don Sperling, experimented with the players over a period of an entire year. And what we discovered was that the best place for the microphone was in a pocket under their arm on the off shooting hand. So what happens? A right-handed player, they said, I don't feel what's going on over here. And a left-handed player said, put the microphone here too as well, because I just don't even reference that when I'm taking a shot. So we had the uniforms altered. We had pockets put on both sides, and we started the era of player microphones, right? And these player microphones are also frequency agile. So if we have a problem, we can change the frequency during the game, so we can put it on the player and not touch it for an entire game potentially. So,
but to expound on that as well, the control had to be. We couldn't just interrupt the player. Says, "Oh, excuse me, we need to change the frequency." No, we had a controller that had to be made so that it can be done remotely. So again, that was another part of the process.
Well, that's not the only time that you've had an idea and then you got somebody to build it. Let's go back to the the data tracking, and explain how you did that and what its impact has been on the game and the broadcast.
Yeah, sure. So first time we did player tracking was 2004. I did it with a company called Kinetic. It was a British aerospace firm out of England, obviously British. They and it took like 4 racks of gear. We went to Conseco Fieldhouse and we actually successfully tracked players in a test environment. So the expense was just crazy and out of whack, to actually implement it in the NBA. But we saw the power of it, how remarkable it was. Then years later, the NBA, 4 NBA teams utilized Sport View, right? And I was informing David Stern the whole way, and all 4 teams made the playoffs and advanced in the playoffs. So David said, "You were right about that. I want that for every team next year."
So explain when you say tracking. You're following every player. What do you mean by that?
It's a series of cameras that track the XY of the players on the court and the XYZ of the ball. So it really did revolutionize the way that teams looked at plays and data. So in other words, what they discovered from the data, first of all, is that rebound dispersal on a 3-point shot is 50-50, right? It's random, right? Whereas on a shot in close to the basket, 70% the defense is going to get it, right? On top of that, they directly identified from positioning on the court that a catch and shoot 3-point shot is the most valuable shot on the court, bar none, right? If the player's feet are set, gets a look at the basket, catches the ball and shoots, that's your top shot, right? Other than a layup at the basket, right? So and then they gradually came up with defensive schemes and understanding of when to try to block a player's shot, when not to, depending on how the player reacts to it. So it's actually completely transformed the way the NBA coaches and the way the NBA looks at the game strategically. So, for instance, the system's so sophisticated now that if a coach sees the Dallas Mavericks run an inbound play, he can literally just say to the computer, "Show me every other time the Dallas Mavericks have run this play with less than 2 minutes on the clock and the score tied." And then, whoop, there's the 5 examples right in front of you. So it's all.
When did you start? When were you diving into that to even current day? You were so ahead in thinking about this.
I was the system architect and the enabler, right?
Yes.
I was not the designer of the technology. That was initially it was SportView, which had somehow hijacked an American military program to apply it to this. It was originally. The software was originally used to deliver missile payloads, right? But
Have a scoop here?
yeah, but it's still all related. But then Second Spectrum with Maheshwaran reinvented it. I actually urged him to do it because, and then now Sony Hawkeye's doing it. But it's and we're moving on toward recognition of limbs and more data, but the player tracking. So if you take synchronous time code with clock and score, with statistics, with player tracking, and combine it with video in an archive, you absolutely know where everything is, right? There's no, you can log further if you want, but mostly for entertainment value, you log, right? For great shots, for pump the fist in the air, for high fives. But otherwise, the architecture of this all the way into the archive has the NBA completely taken care of on a nightly basis, almost like collecting the data right at the cash register. Right, it's all there, all ready to go.
So one other thing that you did that I definitely want to talk about is the replay center. That influenced the rest of all the other sports. Can you talk about what you did with your replay center?
Yeah. So we looked at it and we said, could we do this in the venues? And at the end of the day, we said, we don't want to do this in the venues because if they do it in the venues, the referees would be looking at 2 or 3 replays a night and not just not get good at it, right? So we centralized the replay center, and we started with our first HSAN network, which was a 10 gig network. We bought back about 10 feeds. But the idea was with Evertz and using Dreamcatcher to develop an interface that was so simple that the basketball operations group wouldn't have to hire technicians. They would hire basketball experts, young men and women that knew basketball. Then it was just point and click, point and click. We dumbed it down to the point where they can train somebody up literally in 2 days to get this done. And the whole point of it was to be reviewing a play, but then to have the referee and the replay manager reviewing the play, but also have the replay operator looking at all the other angles that the broadcasters might have had that might influence the play. So now, flash forward to today, they're bringing about 30 feeds back from every game. They've got everything they absolutely need, and they're now marching down the road of bringing back all the cameras in high frame rate as well. So,
and every other league copied what you did.
Yeah.
That's great testament.
I think they did. Yeah, it was very interesting to design it. I used a technique that I learned from a set designer. I would mock it up and I would do drawings and show the referees what we were going to do in the replay center. And then I'd show up at the next meeting and I'd say, let's do this. Let's go through this again. They'd go, well, where are your drawings from last time? Oh, I lost them. I didn't bring them. I don't know where they are. Let's start over again. Let's do this from scratch. So I had them do it that way. And then always, if I did it that way, I learned more stuff, right? I learned different things rather than just iterating on what had happened before, right? So it was, so we continued to design and redesign until we arrived at something that worked. And then, of course, the Replay Center also became a studio, right? Because they would go live from the Replay Center, a content provider. And then we put a camera in, and then we also put a social media expert in to provide all of the video related to all the decisions in there.
You also gave the network partners
Yes.
access space when retired NBA referee Steve Javi and became a part of the ESPN ABC team and gave that access to not only just the chitter and chatter and also being in the replay center with his own Dreamcatchers monitoring and also connectivity to the mobile unit to the game. That was, again, the strength of the partnership is what made all that happen. And it continues because the NBA is so forward thinking, and the partnership and the existence of the partnership and the health of it is so critical because obviously NBA needs all the cameras from all the network trucks, the home trucks, the visiting trucks. And that's very, very critical. So again, it was by this time, obviously I'm in a technical management capacity, and it was just being engaged and involved and just being part of the process has just been so fulfilling because we've been in every step of the way with you as you gave us that access.
At the time, I was working directly for Adam Silver, and Adam was the great driver of transparency. Adam said, take the curtains away. I want people to see what's going on in this room.
So moving forward, let's talk about what's coming next in technology. You know, what is something that excites you? You want to start, Andy or Eddie?
Right, Andy.
Well, that's a loaded question. 1080p HDR is currently, we're out. That's a standard that we're all in right now at ESPN and ABC, and we're able to connect to NBA HSAN and back to the replay center in HDR with all the feeds. So the bandwidth has increased tremendously. Communications, we have shared communication intercom back and forth between every site and Secaucus, New Jersey to the NBA TOC. We have literally all at this point right now as we head into this current NBA playoffs, NBA conference finals and finals. We are going to be transmitting everything in 1080p HDR. We're going to have a fair amount of the brand new 4K UHD 5500 cameras in high frame rate because the clarity, the turnaround speed time, a great tool, not just for on-air presentation, but for the replay center. There's so much clarity, whether it's basketball, football, down the sidelines, looking down the sidelines, catching the ball, the feed in, and all these different things. We're trying to tell the same story as the replay center is trying to determine a call. So a lot of these tools now are going to give us the ability to do that in a quick turnaround time with multiple angles. So that's what we're excited about and what we're looking forward to in from a future look at it. But obviously from a technology and tracking, obviously there's so much of it. And obviously there's multiple layers, not just the linear or the primary broadcast, but all the altcasts. We can make altcasts for days because there's so much of it there.
Andy?
So putting in perspective, when I first started doing the NBA, I was doing the Celtics games in Boston. We had 3 cameras and 1 disc for replay. And at that time, for the finals games that happened during the week were on tape delay at 11:30 at night. I'd do the 11 o'clock news and sit with the sports guy and would watch the Celtics playing Phoenix or whoever in the finals. So as I look ahead and see all that has transformed, it still comes down all to storytelling and building the players, building the story that's within the game. All these toys are great and they do help. So I see a continuation of intimacy that will happen, where that intimacy comes through drones. I used a Skycam for the first time Christmas Day in Chicago. The camera wasn't quite ready. Mike Krasnick, who ran the camera, I don't think he's ever sweat that much in his life trying to get the shots because he was nervous being on the air live with the thing because it was brand new. It has obviously transformed and is used in basketball, used in football, and all sorts of other sports now. But the ability where drones will be safe and be able to be used within a stadium to get closer, to get angles that provide the movement. The whole reason I had the rail cam built, the whole idea for that was to show the speed of the athletes. Because from a distance, track and field, I use that for an example, but also in basketball, as you come for the main camera, it's only panning a few degrees left, a few degrees right. You lose the speed that these players run. They are so fast and big, and that's what we can get to.
That's perfect lead-in because Steve consults for a company out of Norway, Moybridge. You want to talk about?
That's a very interesting technology. There's kind of a back to, Ken Kirschbaumer and I were talking about 3D. And actually, when we did 3D in 2007 in a double wide trailer here at the All-Star game in Vegas,
that game,
it was the best time. It was the best 3D I ever saw. And there actually it went downhill. So the reason was that we had uncompressed, HD for left and right eye. We had a 50-foot screen, and I designed a theater that where the seats raked down. And it was really a remarkable experience. It was great. It was perfect, right? And by the time it got to the small screen, there just wasn't enough picture information to allow your brain to compose that 3D image in the back of your head, right? It just didn't work. And then I moved on to I've since worked on other aspects of this with another company, with Canon Viewpoint. And that was actually a volumetric data capture. So all of this is going to continue. And at some point in, 25, 30 years, you'll walk into a college venue and somebody will say, "What are we doing today?" "Oh, it's women's volleyball." They'll hit the volleyball button and the whole thing will get done, right? With an array of cameras, several layers of arrays of cameras. So the Moybridge guys got a very interesting technology where they're essentially stringing Sony cell phone cameras across a strip. They can do a virtual move across, doing depth mapping and moving from image to image, so that behind a tennis player, there can be a rail cam, but there is no movement of a rail cam, so it's not interrupting with the sight of the opposing player looking at them, right? So I think it works particularly effectively.
Yeah, they're talking about building into the scorer's table and can go like 30 feet and tracking up and down. And there's no limitation, of having the rail cams physically.
I have other ideas for it.
Okay, well, good.
Yep, there you go. It can also go vertically too. I think that's also go
Exactly.
So I think I think there's a lot there, but I think we've got a solid innovation that continues to this day. On every NBA, if you have the NBA app, on every game there's a mobile view version of the game, right? So what it is, and this is another thing that I worked with Mobile TV Group on with Phil Garvin and Nick Garvin, was in the background when they switch to a wide shot, the mobile view camera is tighter, right? So it works for a cell phone. So what we do is we're tighter on the mobile view master shot, but as soon as the players look like they're going to take a shot, we widen out, right? So you can see the whole court, see the rebound, and then we go back in, right? So it really works quite well, and it's watched a lot particularly across China and Asia, because they're watching the games in the morning on their way to work or in their offices, right? So it really helps, because the wide shot of television on a mobile camera is just, the players are just small.
So we have a time for a couple questions, and the panelists will be available for questions after. Does anybody have a question? Go ahead. Hold on, we got a mic coming to you. Thank you.
What are the ideas you have? You just mentioned you have lots of ideas. Can you share some?
I think the idea is to get it closer to Andy's original idea, is behind the glass. All the ball players, their number one goal is to make the hoop, right? So have it come toward it. And there's always, when there's a foul or a break in the action, it's another way to kind of cover the free throw as well, especially the first free throw shot.
Any other questions? Any final thoughts? Well, I want to thank you very much for coming here today. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you for putting this together.
Great to be here. This has been terrific.
Thanks, Tom.